What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato. Today, I want to talk to you about societal change and the gigantic impact you can have on it if you choose to. If you choose to, and that's the important point. We have a bunch of important questions that we need to be asking ourselves right now. And unless we're asking ourselves these questions on a regular basis, there's a good chance that our contribution to what society can be is going to be a net negative. And that's what we don't want. I don't think any of us want to leave purposely a net negative on society and on our legacy. So that's why it's important to ask these questions. And that's why it's important to be aware of the contributions that we're giving to society and to the world in general. Before we get to that, make sure that you take a second to hit that pause button and go review the podcast. You can review us on Apple or on Spotify or any other podcast host that you're using. Give us up to a 5-star review. Of course, the more reviews that we have, the more the message is shared, the more people are reached, and the more impact that we can have. And that is a contribution you, of course, are having on the world. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for giving us a review. Thank you for helping spread the message because that is so important at this day and age. So, of course, as always, this idea was sparked by just something that I've recognized lately. And this thing that has been going on has been happening for years now, but it's all of a sudden like I've been recognizing it more and more. And I don't know if it's because I've been outside of my bubble more, because we all live in a bubble. We all live in our, we do our same things. We go to like 3 to 5 regular places. We see, about 10 to 15 different people on a regular basis. But outside of that, we don't, many of us don't venture outside of that bubble very often. And admittedly, I have been the same way. The facility that I owned for 10 years was in a place called Alexandria, Kentucky, which has like 10 people in it. And I knew most of those 10 people. So, not really 10 people, but it wasn't all that far off. So, as you can imagine, it was easy to stay in the bubble. The grocery store was like 5 minutes up the road. The gym was 5 minutes from my house. So, it was easy for me to kind of stay in that bubble. So, maybe this is just me venturing out. And because I'm seeing more things and in more public places, I'm just actually able to see what's going on. And what I'm talking about is the tendency to be antisocial. Even though we all want things to quote be normal again. And that is a thing that I hear people say very regular. I just want something, I just want to go back to the way things are. I just want things to be normal again. And unless we wake up to our contribution to what's happening, then a normal way of living will be very unlikely. Will be very unlikely. Now, it's worth recognizing that things will never, quote, be the same. We're not going to go backwards. That's worth pointing out. That's literally impossible, at least as far as I know. Time travel was not a thing. But we can shift society. We can change the way society is. We can change the way that society is moving, and it can start with us. But of course, we tend to not look at us. We tend to look at things around us. And we tend to ask questions like, why are people so blank these days? And you can enter any attribute or word into blank, any characteristic into blank. And that's a question that I hear often. Why are people such assholes these days? Why are people so sensitive these days? Why are people so whatever you want to enter into that X, into that blank? That is a normal thing these days, or a usual thing these days. And it's a good question to ask. But here's the question we don't ask, or the realization we don't have, is that in why are people, we are people. We are society. Every single one of us that asks the question, why are people like this these days? You're people. You are society. Why is society like this these days? You are society. You are part of society. And so your contribution is then going out to society. It's like a ripple effect. Think of a pond, and whenever you throw a rock into a pond, if you throw just a pebble into a pond, it puts little ripples. If you throw a bigger rock, it has bigger ripples. And then if you throw a stone into the pond, it has huge ripples, and it'll ripple real far out. You are the same way. You have a ripple effect on those around you. And depending on how you go about contributing to society will dictate whether or not that ripple is big or small, and whether it is a net negative or a net positive. And those are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about, which is hard to appreciate because we look at ourselves and we go, well, I'm just a person. It's just me. How can one out of 375 million people in the United States of America and 7 billion people on the planet, how can one person out of all that leave an impact on society, on this big idea called society? Well, it goes back to the question that everyone asks: how does society change? Why are people like this? And if a lot of people are asking that question and a lot of people want society to change, then that goes to show that it starts with the people starting to change. And the reason that you can have such a gigantic impact is because depending on how many people are around you and how you impact those people, you'll have a ripple effect. People will watch you. And if you treat them a different way, they will treat you a different way. Your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. If you inwardly are thinking society sucks, people are a bunch of assholes, they're all selfish, they're all antisocial, you will treat the world as such and you will get that back. No questions asked. That's the way it'll be. That's the way it'll be. Some people won't fulfill that, and you'll go, well, that person's a nice person. Well, what about Sally over here? She's a nice person. Maybe she's just able to overlook all of this. But if most people are treating you a certain way, there's one common denominator in most people, and that's you. Now, this isn't me pointing the finger at you. I am society as well. I am people. I am people. So if I say, why are people X? Why are people so selfish these days? If I say that, I am people. Now, I recognize that every human being is selfish. And so we all have a tendency to be selfish, and we all have a tendency to find our safe spot, and we will protect ourselves to our fullest capabilities, considering our risk tolerance. But unless we start to recognize our contribution, we start to look outside of the people around us and point at all of them and start to look inward at us, then it's society will continue to move down this path of separation. We'll move down this path of pulling apart. Now, this I don't believe is on accident. I believe a lot of this has been propagated, if you will. And there are three ways in which it has been propagated. One is with COVID, two is with technology, and three, this isn't as purposeful. This is more of a natural human tendency, and that is being a follower. So I want to break each one of those down and just talk about how each one of these propagates our division, if you will, and how in our antisocial behavior, and how us as individuals can start to flip that script, flip the table over, and move in a different direction, bringing ourselves back together, still be individuals, still have ideas, still have our own thoughts, which many of us don't have, by the way, but have our own thoughts, and yet not be divisive, not be antisocial, not have trouble looking somebody in the eye. Understand when I talk about these things, it's important that you set any fixed thoughts that you have aside. Because when it comes to having change, it requires integrating new ideas or different ideas. And by integrating, I don't mean fully accepting. I mean being prepared to be open to them, being prepared to think about them, to look into them, to let them mingle in your head and let them meld in your head, and then come up with your own conclusion. That's what I mean. That's what I mean by being open. So when I say COVID was, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of if COVID was on purpose, but I will go down the rabbit hole of if the divisiveness in COVID was on purpose. So when I say that, and maybe you have a hard time with that, my request, my suggestion is not to accept what I'm saying as fact. It is to be open to the idea of it. That is change in society, simply being open to an idea that it might be true. And even though it's different than what you think, it might be true. And that's why we're stuck. That is a big reason why we're stuck, because all of us are hanging on so tight to our ideas. We grab on our ideas, we hug them tight, and we're like, fuck you. This is my idea. No, this is what I believe. Instead of going, well, tell me why you think that. That's interesting. Why do you think that? Well, tell me a little more. Okay. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't make as much sense to me. And guess what? That's okay. That is okay. So that's my suggestion, is to be open to listening to ideas. So first, COVID. It was very clear in the beginning of COVID that there was going to be a division between people who will wear masks and people who didn't wear masks. It was very clear that that was going to be the case. And then when the booster shot came out, I can't think of the actual name of what in the world that's called. The Help me out here. The booster shot. That's what I'm going to go ahead and call it, because I can't think of like the normal word for it right now. But when the shot came out, the same thing happened. It was very clear that we were going to have division over who got the vaccine. Vaccine, that's the word I was looking for. Who got the vaccine and who didn't. It was very clear that that was going to be a divisive issue. Now, let me ask you a question. While vaccines have kind of had a little bit of a division to them up until COVID, flu vaccines and giving kids shots before that, giving kids vaccines. There were definitely people who were like, no, I'm not going to do that. But for the most part, it's like most people were just like, okay, if you don't want a flu shot, cool. Like, don't get a flu shot. If you don't want to do that, cool, don't do that. Like, whatever. You do you. I'm going to do me. If I want to do it, then I'm going to do it. And then all of a sudden, this happened, and we were extremely divisive about it. And it was propagated in the news, and it was propagated in the government. It was expanded by the news and by the government. They didn't try and help each other. They didn't try and go, well, people are allowed to not, if they don't want to get something, if they don't want to do something, they're allowed to not do it. It was propagated by the government and by the news. They built in division. They built that in. At the same time, they stuck us in our house. Everyone stay in your house. Everyone, stay apart. Don't get close to each other. No one, no one's allowed to see each other. Not allowed to see each other for holidays. Not allowed to go do anything. Stay away from everybody. So literally, we were divided. And during that time, there was so much high emotion that our attachment to that division has stuck. Because as human beings, we are emotional beings. And when we have emotional situations, those situations have a tendency to linger. Think in your past as a child or even as an early adult. Think about the things that you remember. They have some emotion attached to them, either a good emotion or a bad emotion. And you remember them because of that. And so many of us remember what happened during COVID, during the shutdown time, because of the emotion that was attached to it. And many of us have the same behaviors that were built in during that time because of the emotion that was attached to that situation, to that experience. We still have our behaviors attached and we still bring them with us. Like I said, not being able to make eye contact with somebody. Whenever COVID was going on and we all had masks on, it was awkward to freaking look at somebody with a mask on. Of course, it was awkward. That's not what humans should do. So now that we don't have masks on, we still have a hard time making eye contact with people, just looking at somebody and giving them a head nod. So it was ingrained in us during that time. On top of that comes technology. Now, technology was around before COVID, of course. So all of that with technology started well before COVID. But technology was then a supercharger of our antisocial behavior during COVID. Because once we were divided, then we were put on these technological platforms. We started doing things on Zoom. We looked at our phone a lot more. Literally, all of those things went up substantially. Being on Netflix, all of these things. Any of these things are built for social activity. Online, it is much different being social, quote unquote, online and being social in person. Being social in person requires a different ability. It requires different attributes. It requires different skills. It requires being able to feel a person out, not literally. It requires being able to interact with somebody, to be able to control emotions, to be able to go up and down. Whereas online, you can be whatever kind of asshole you want to be, and you're not going to get any feedback because no one's going to come at you. But 20 years ago, if you got to the point where you're being an asshole, yeah, you're gonna feel it potentially, literally, physically, probably. So technology supercharged this antisocial behavior. And now we have hung on to that antisocial behavior. So much so that most of us, maybe not most, a lot of us walk around with headphones on almost all day long. And that makes it impossible to be social. Impossible to be social. Because what do? If you don't have headphones on, you see somebody and you try and say something and they don't hear you, and you're like, oh, and you feel bad. And so you just keep on walking. And that's not a fun feeling for most people. We don't like to feel bad. We don't like to feel rejected. So instead of actually trying to talk to people, when we see somebody with headphones on, we just go along our way. And at this point, maybe we just assume that everyone has headphones on because earbuds are so small, they're hard to see. So earbuds or headphones have propagated that. It literally makes it impossible to be social whenever you are isolated in your head all day long. It makes it impossible. If you go to the gym, everyone has headphones on. Everyone has headphones on. They're all isolated in their own box. They're all isolated in themselves. Everyone does. So these things stacked on top of each other increased our divisiveness, increased our antisocial behavior, and stacked that antisocial tendency on top of each other. And then, of course, human nature kicks in, and human nature is to follow along with what other people do and to look around you and to go, well, looks like everyone else is doing it, so why don't I just act the same way? That's human nature. That is the tendency because, again, we want to be accepted by the tribe. And if we want to be accepted by the tribe, then we should go along with what the tribe's doing. Otherwise, we won't be accepted. The irony is the behavior right now is anti-tribal behavior by everybody, and everyone is following along with that. And that makes it challenging to actually have some sort of, again, pro-social behavior, pro-social movement going on. So because we have a tendency to follow along with the crowd and to do what the crowd does, then if everyone else has a hard time looking each other in the eye, then we just quit trying to look people in the eye. If no one else waves, I go for a walk every day in the neighborhood and I wave at everybody who drives by. And 70% of the time, people don't wave back. Don't even look. They just look straight forward. Pretend like I'm not even there and I'm 10 feet away from their car. So I am sure that they can see me. I'm sure they know that I'm there. So we look at those things and we're like, well, everyone else is doing it, so why don't I just do it? Everyone else has headphones on, why don't I just go ahead and put headphones on? Everyone else is always looking at their phone, so why don't I just go ahead and look at my phone? We look at these things and we think of them as quote normal, but they're not normal, they're just usual. There's a big difference between the two. It's just what is being done now. That doesn't mean it is the thing to do. That doesn't mean it is the thing that moves us in a direction that is useful. So that's why those three things stacked on top of each other created this perfect storm for us to now be in a place where a lot of us and society in general has this antisocial feel to it, has this antisocial stigma to it. But again, we all have the opportunity to make change. We all have the opportunity to leave an impact. And the question is, what kind of net impact are you leaving? Because none of us are perfect at the same time. We're all fallible. We all screw up. We all will, be assholes from time to time. Every single one of us will be selfish from time to time. We'll all be antisocial from time to time. And that is okay. The question is, what is the net? What is the net contribution that you're having? And to be able to start to move in a different direction, to move in a direction of quote, I want things to be normal again. I want things to go back the way they were. To be able to start to do that, like I said, it starts with us making a choice. Us as individuals making a choice, which is empowering. It is empowering. It's not a bad thing that we can make a choice to start having a ripple effect on those around us and on society. That is empowering, that you, as an individual, as a person, if you're in America, one of 375 million people, if you're not in America, just on this earth, one of 7 billion people, no matter where you are, you can have an impact and a ripple effect on every human being around you. And if those people are better, then they'll have a ripple effect on those people around them. And if those people are better, so on and so forth. And that's how the ripple effect starts to happen. That's how contribution starts to happen. It's not sitting and waiting and bitching and complaining and demanding that things change. It's changing them. It's you deciding to do something about it. It's you deciding to take action. It's you going, if my outer world is a reflection of my inner world, then I need to change my inner world. And when I take a responsibility for my life happens for me instead of happens to me. That's what happens. That's what it takes. And it starts simply by being a trendsetter instead of a follower. And by trendsetter, I mean going and doing, I mean acting in a way that you think people were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Because most of the people, honestly, who I feel have this antisocial behavior around them is between the age of like 30 and 55, maybe 25 and 55. And those are the people that actually know what it was like 10 years ago. They remember what it was like. A lot of them remember what it was like before phones came around, before the internet even came around. So again, we're not going to go backwards. Technology is not going away. We shouldn't expect that to be. So how do we accept the landscape that we have and use it to leave a better impact? How do we start to actually set the trend of being social, set the trend of having eye contact, set the trend of waving to people, set the trend of nodding and acknowledging people? How do we start to do those things instead of following along with everyone else, what everyone else is doing? That's simply what it takes. It's not some big grand thing. It's not like, oh, there's no way. We got somebody's got to do something with this. It's not that. It's a matter of just deciding I can do something, and if I leave a good impact on 5 people today, and those people will leave a good impact on 5 people, and those people leave a good impact on 5 people, imagine that ripple effect. Imagine that compounding effect moving outward. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the mindset shift that it takes to be able to recognize your ability as a human being, your ability as a person in society to leave an impact and make a change. Because you can do it no matter what, no matter how people have lied to you, no matter if it's the government, no matter if it's organizations, no matter if it's big pharma, no matter if it's healthcare, telling you that you should just rely on them and let them take care of you. Clearly, that idea is not worked out. It's not worked out. So now we can switch our ideas, change our way of thinking, and go, well, damn, now it's time for me to leave a ripple effect. Now it's time for me to leave an impact on those around me. And that's what you can do to start to make the change that you're looking for. That's what you can do to leave the legacy on this world, to leave a dent in this world, and leave with a net positive instead of a net negative. I appreciate you guys listening today. I know it was a little heavy today, but I think these hard ideas, these hard topics, these hard conversations, it's just something that needs to happen. And the closer that we can get to truth, the more likely we are to be able to just understand each other. That's what this all comes down to, is just being able to understand each other. We can do it. We can understand. Doesn't matter what color, doesn't matter what race, doesn't matter what gender, doesn't matter any of that. We can understand each other. And that's what it comes down to. But it takes shifting your mind and being open to new ideas to be able to start to do that. So that's it for today. Go out, leave your ripple effect, have an impact on some people today, make some changes, be the trendsetter, not the follower, and go out there and step into growth.